So in team sports, which is what we really work with, acceleration we think is one of the biggest keys that you can have to have success, and being able to accelerate properly is going to give you the best chance of success in your sport, no matter what sport it is, especially with what we work with. We don't work with a lot of long distance and cross country and stuff like that, but even there, some of these sprint mechanics we're going to talk about today we think can transfer. So a resisted sprint, we hear about all the time, and you see us pull sleds a lot, but we hear about kids or coaches or athletes doing all the time, and we love a resisted sprint. But what we've seen go wrong, or what we've done wrong, is usually we do too much resistance and we're looking for the wrong things. So like a typical example is a wall drive. So if we get into a wall drive position, okay, a lot of times, and again, ton of people have done it, and we start, and you might be in a good mechanic here, but as soon as you start going through the progressions, you start losing postures, and it's about how quick I can get my feet to go in that position. We don't want that. When we sprint, we got to make sure that we keep the right angles, and we got to make sure that we keep the right strides the entire time. A short, choppy step with a broken pelvis in this position is not going to help us accelerate into a game. Even though this feels cool and I'm getting in this position and it feels like I'm running really fast, this is not going to transfer with the way that for you to be able to accelerate and sprint fast. So when we use a resistance, right, the biggest thing that we're trying to work on is learning how to project. What that means is learning how to go forward. So many of us, when we sprint, okay, even if we start in a correct position with good postures, a good shin angle here, the first thing that we do is my hips go back like this, and I start shuffling into this position. Cycling in that position. My heel starts coming up and over. One, we get really short and choppy, and that's going to kill your rhythm as you work your way down the sprint. Okay, so what we want to make sure is that we keep these angles. My hip should push through my shoulder, and I'm going to get into this position. This is where I want to get to. Now, depending on your position, depending on your sport, depending on what the play is, okay, you might not be able to get to that full extension, but you should still be a derivative of that movement. Your hips and your thighs should go forward and up, and you should project out just like that. So the projection is the biggest reason why we would do a resisted sprint, or we would be on a wall. Okay, now this weight, what it's going to do, again, it's going to help you feel yourself go forward. It's going to help you feel yourself orient force backwards. When you accelerate, we really want that angle going in this position, that shin going in that position to help push and project me going forward. A lot of times when we run, it's really hard, okay, to feel that. We get in here to where my shin is extremely vertical, to where, again, my hips are going to come up and I'm going to have to go around like this. Your foot's going to be on the ground for too long. And again, the transition that you're going to work your way up into that sprint, it's going to be completely messed up because you weren't being able to push and project out with the right postures and angles through the beginning of the acceleration. So if we get into a sled, Katie, I'm going to have you hop in the sled. The biggest thing is you got to figure out the weight. Okay? Everybody thinks like the heavier the weight, the harder I grind, the faster I'm going to get. We found that through failure, I've done it a bunch, the harder we grind, the actually slower we're going to get. So if I put a lot of weight on and I got a guy going like this or a girl going like that and they're short and choppy and they're here, that's going to transition and making their run even worse. We don't want that. So with the resistance, when we start, we want it really light with them. If you're using a band and you're pulling on somebody, it should be maybe 5 to 10% of their body weight at most. I'm barely pushing on their hips. It shouldn't be like I'm holding them here and you see them doing one of these in a band. If you're doing that, sprint mechanic, I guarantee when you accelerate, you're going to be short and choppy in this position, and you got a lot more left in the tank as far as being efficient in acceleration. So when we sprint, I have Kane in here because he's really good at this. Okay, when you get the weight on the sled, or if you have a band, the biggest thing you got to worry about here, to me, okay, is one, you got to keep your posture. Okay, but that's a staple in anything that we do when we run. But the second thing is a lot of times when you have weight, we stay too low. Okay, so if I have too much weight, okay, my hips aren't going to rise, and I'm going to be in this sunk low position like this, which we see in sport all the time where too many people are in this position. If I'm low as I work my way down to a run, it's going to take me so long to be able to push out of that. Compared to, Cherry, if you follow me over here, if my hips are rising in a good position and I hit in this position to where my hips are here, and as I'm getting up, I'm working these positions, that angle from my hip, my knee, and my ankle, okay, isn't going to be as big here. So it's not going to take me as long to get out of that. Like they call it like a squatted run. We don't want to run like that in that squatted position. Your feet are going to be on the ground for way too long. So that is what's going to help dictate for me, okay, if I don't have a 1080, if I don't have lasers, if I'm just trying to get a feel and trying to get them for a feel for projection, and I'm trying to kind of take them through an evaluation, the weight is going to, watching them project out and watching the height of their hips, that's going to help me dictate the load that I'm going to have on him. So as we watch Canyon go, okay, Canyon, let's go, right leg forward. The biggest thing I want you to see, and I'm trying to do with Canyon, is that he's going to push his hips through his shoulder. Now, every step, he should go a little bit farther, a little bit faster, and get a little bit higher. If you're not, and you're staying here, okay, you're not winning. You'll see a lot of times we'll go big, and then boom, and we stay through here the entire time. That's what we're going to try to avoid. So let's watch Canyon here. So if you see from that sprint, he did exactly what I wanted him to. His hips went forward, his hips rise, and he really accelerated through that entire position. If you watch a couple of things with his foot, he got a little toey, and those are some things that we're going to have to work on, which is maybe he might not be a guy that we pull sleds with. But as far as feeling that projection, as far as having an emphasis with the sled, okay, he did a really good job with that. The more skilled and the more experience you have with the resistance, what you're trying to do is you're trying to feel yourself stay in that acceleration phase for as long as possible. This is going to help expose you to that peak power for a longer period of time, which when you do a normal run, you don't get exposed to that very long, because your goal is with acceleration, our goal is we're trying to get to top speed as fast as possible for our sport. That's what we want. Okay, that's what acceleration is trying to do. So we're trying to push or drive through acceleration into an upright position as fast as we can. But we have to be better at acceleration. So in a normal run, you don't have a lot of time to feel that like you would maybe on a progression of a clean or any movement that you would in the weight room. Okay, so the better you get at it, now your goal is I'm trying to stay in the right angles, trying to stay in that acceleration phase for as long as I possibly can, but still gradually working up. Extremely hard to do, okay? Hard to teach too, so that's why we don't do it a bunch. But again, the more skilled you get, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to see, okay, that negative force here every single time where I'm pushing for as long as I possibly can. Let's watch another rep here with Canyon and see how we do. So if you saw him that sprint, now he's a little bit more warm. You saw him really, we would say pushing through that entire 10 yards. You saw him driving through that entire 10 yards. Okay, now if we take the sled out, our goal would be to get to transfer that to what he was just doing with the sled. Nothing changes, except for now we're trying to gain a little bit more ground, and we're trying to decrease a little bit of that foot contact time every single step, like we don't have that weight on that sled. So now we're gonna run without the weight. As soon as we run without the weight, okay, one of the biggest things is now we don't have a feel with something pushing against my hips. So I don't feel myself wanting to project forward. So I want to make sure, okay, that our athletes, right when they're done running, it's like, okay, hey, I'm going to really feel myself push into that just like I just had that sled on. The second thing is you almost start falling forward because you don't have that weight. Okay, so sometimes, again, if it's your first time doing it, your first couple runs might not feel great. We got to get better at it. And then eventually it's like every single sprint you run, the goal is to be technically sound more than anything else. So let's watch if his hips project and let's see how long he can drive through that acceleration phase. Push. Yeah. I think he did awesome. Again, he's not super warm right now. Canyon hasn't played competitively for quite a few years. He's one of our best coaches that we have here. He might have rose a little faster than we want, okay, but he really pushed. If you watch him, he gained ground. Okay, he worked himself into the right shapes. That was a really good run right there. So for prescribing the runs with the resisted sprint, I think at the beginning, yeah, you need to know what your outcome is. So if you look at your run and you're a phenomenal accelerator, you gain ground, your feet are really quick off the ground, maybe a resisted sprint might not be what you need. If your first step, what they say in sports, or you trying to increase and produce power is not that great, that's when we really focus on the resisted sprints with our athletes. Now, how we pair it's a little bit different as we work our way through the phases. At the beginning, I like to work them together. I like to superset them together to where they're going to pull 1 to 2 sled sprints so they can feel it, and then we're going to go 1 to 2 sprints, okay, with a similar distance so that we can really start to get that transfer in the way that we run. Now, you have to make sure you get a complete rest every time. Another thing that I used to do a bunch is we would pull a sled, boom, get out, run another one, pull a sled, boom, get out, and we were conditioning more than anything else. And part of it is we are limited by the amount of time that we have, but I would rather get 3 really quality sprints and 3 really quality sled pulls than get 10 crappy reps where we're conditioning, and that's not what we're trying to do. Okay, so again, the first thing I would do is I would superset the 2 sprints. The more skilled we get at a run, like Canyon I've worked with forever, he might be, okay, we have 5x2 on a 10-yard sprint today. He's going to do those sprints, but we know we're still trying to get better acceleration. When he finishes his sprints at max velocity, now we're going to try to get him stronger in those phases, and we don't want him to be fatigued. We're going to pull the sled at the end. So we're actually going to put as heavy of a weight as we possibly can to where he stays technically sound. And again, you can do that with a 1080, you can do that with lasers, or you can really try to do it with your coach's eye, but you cannot sacrifice putting more weight on by sacrificing the technique on the sprint. But then you can do those at the end of the sprint, and what we've really found is really helped develop a lot of strength, a lot of transfer, we think, to the way that they run in the sport, a lot more than anything that we do in the weight room. We wish we could pull a heavy sled with way more athletes than we can, because it's nice to do it in here. We don't always get to do it with our teams just because of space and resources. But a lot of our athletes, we can rip a lot of great sprints, and then we can do a lot of strength with the heavy sled sprint, as long as that we're staying technically sound. If we're not technically sound, the whole reason why I wanted to make this video. I've seen so many sprints to where it's like people are pulling sleds, and I love it because the effort's there and they're grinding, but you're putting yourself in a position that's actually making you slower. And I think it's actually doing more harm than more good. And another form of resisted sprints is with the pushes. Now, we never sprint with a push. The most explosive we get with it is we might get into a bound position, but you have to be extremely strong and extremely technically sound to be able to do a bound with a push sled. What I don't want you to do, okay? And again, I've done it, conditioning, however it was back in the day and those things, but this is not gonna make you faster, okay? If you're in this position and you're here and my hips are like this and I'm pushing like this is gonna make us, it's gonna transfer to the same way that we run. The biggest issue that we see, like I said at the beginning, is your hips go back and you look like this, okay? You're gonna be in that position. We see people trying to grind on pushing a sled, and it's like a race, and I'm doing one of these. That's a terrible way to sprint, okay? And again, it seems cool because your legs are on fire and you're pushing a sled, but that's not gonna make you faster. To me, we could do a lot more things to get us stronger. That's not gonna negatively impact the way that we run. If we do a sled, okay, if we have an injury or something like that, okay, we're gonna focus on these angles, because this is the position that I wanna be in when I sprint. I want my hips forward, I want good posture, I wanna be able to build some strength with my ankle, my knee, and my hip, but I'm gonna make sure that I stay in these right angles every single time. I'm not gonna reach, I'm not gonna let my hips go back, and I'm not gonna lose that posture with my back. It's not about speed on a sled push. It's about trying to feel those positions and really trying to build as much strength that we possibly can in the angles that we would when we sprint. If you have a torn ACL, or if you have a bad hamstring, or you have something to where you guys are doing some therapy and you're pushing yourself on a sled, and you look like this, and your pelvis is wobbling and tilting like this, because you're probably trying to fight it, or you're having an ankle collapse, and you're here, please stop doing that, or ask why you're doing that. That is gonna really negatively impact the way that you run in the long term, and it's gonna put a lot of unneeded stress. You might as well run. You might as well work on getting better at running than push one of these, okay? If you're trying to build the quad, there's a lot better ways than pushing a sled in a bad mechanic than just doing that, okay? So that's why we resisted sprint. That's how we resisted sprint. If you need more help with that, DM us. We'll help. We'll send videos, do everything that we can to help you guys out. Appreciate it.